Welcome and thank you for joining us today for your training against modern slavery. Gattaca is proud to be part of this global fight against this terrible evil. What is modern slavery? Well, it's a global issue and it can take many forms, but in essence it's whenever a gang or an individual uses somebody else against their will and profits from it, making them do work that they do not want to do. Or they're in work and there's someone taking their wages and using violence either against themselves or against their loved ones to control this. It occurs whenever somebody makes somebody do work that they don't want to do, or maybe takes their money, or maybe provides substandard conditions and intimidates them from speaking out. It can include servitude, working in someone's home perhaps. It's forced or compulsory labour, and certain sectors are perhaps more vulnerable than others, but in reality it can almost be in any sector. And it also includes human trafficking, where someone's taken from their home environment or their home country and moved somewhere else. They might have even paid for this, perhaps thousands of pounds for this privilege, perhaps seeking work. And they're taken and they're perhaps bound, perhaps beaten, trapped, and then made to work. It includes debt bondage. That can be just an individual who perhaps borrows money from the wrong person, maybe not even realising that this person is going to charge them extortionate rates of interest, which they can never repay, and then will use threats to make them work or to hand over their wages to pay off a debt that in reality can never be repaid. And it can be highly organised. These criminal gangs find it very lucrative, so of course it can be very sophisticated. So what are we looking at here? Well, it's a global phenomenon, truly. You can be a modern slave of any nationality, including British. You can be trafficked almost to any other country. And it can start when you're simply kidnapped, or you might just be promised work. Obviously, it involves an element of control. How does that work? Well, they might have your identification documents or your money. They might take your phone, your access to your bank account, and then be able to control you by threatening you or your family. People can find themselves trapped and in a cycle that they can never get out of. And then you have, effectively, a modern slave. I'd like to take you to a video now that looks at this phenomenon.
I saw an advert online for a building job in the UK. I called this Polish guy. He told me it would cost £400 but promised regular work as soon as we arrived. He said he would sort out somewhere to live with the other men I would be working with. I was happy and optimistic. I had lost my job in Poland and had no money. I was told I could pay for my transport and accommodation out of my first month's wages. It looked like a chance for a new life. I was driven to the UK in a minibus with some other people and dropped off outside the accommodation.
I came to the UK 3 years ago looking for work. I got some occasional shifts as a cleaner, but I wanted a permanent job with a regular pay. A friend told me he knew someone who could find work for me in a salad packing factory, and he gave me a number to call. I called the number. It was a Lithuanian man. He said the work was guaranteed. I transferred £300 to him, and he told me to contact a lady at a recruitment agency who would organize the work for me. I started temporary work at the factory through the recruitment agency, and things were better. Even though I wasn't earning a lot of money, I finally had a routine and some stability in my life.
A man picked me up in a BMW, took me to a house and told me I could stay there, but I would need to pay a £250 deposit for the rent. I had no money, so he said he would add it to what I owed him for transport. He took my passport and identity card to complete the paperwork for my job. I lived with some other men who had also come over to find work. The house was overcrowded with dirty mattresses and sheets. It didn't feel safe. The job I was promised didn't exist. I wasn't given work for 6 weeks. I was living with no money to support myself and completely dependent on the agent for my living costs. Each week I owed him more money since I was building up debt for food and rent. The agent made me open a bank account so I could apply for jobs, but he kept the bank card.
I applied for a permanent job at the factory. The man who arranged the job called me and said that I had to pay him another £500 now that I had a permanent job. I told him I didn't have enough money, and he threatened to send some people to collect the money from me. The week after, I was walking home from work when a man stopped me. He grabbed me by the throat and demanded I give him money to repay my debt. He told me he would find me again soon. I heard that other people from the factory owed this gang money too. Some of them quit their jobs and went back to their home country. I eventually saved up and paid back the £500, but they told me that I owed them interest because I hadn't paid them back on time.
I was taken to recruitment agencies to apply for jobs. He told me to give his address instead of the one I was living at. He told me a mobile phone number to give, as the recruitment agency would text me when more work was available. I was given a temporary job packing chicken in a factory. As soon as I was paid each week, he would use my bank card to take out all of my wages to cover the money I owed for travel and accommodation. He gave me only £20 a week to buy food. I felt constantly threatened by him. Once, when I had been given only 3 days' work, he got angry and punched me in the face, leaving me with a black eye. I felt ashamed that I had got myself into this situation, but there was no one I could turn to for help. He had total control of my life, and I didn't think I would ever get out of the debt I was in.
At the weekend I went to do my shopping with a friend, and we were attacked by the gang. I was pushed around, and my friend tried to argue with them. They broke her jaw, and she had to be taken to hospital. I was terrified. My life was totally miserable. I didn't leave the house for months, except for work. And I couldn't sleep because I was too scared that the gang might come to my house in the night. I wanted to ask for help, tell someone what was going on, but I didn't know who could help. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't know if they would understand or help, and I was scared that the gang would find it out. A detective came to my house with a Lithuanian translator and said he was investigating a gang that had been threatening workers in the area. He said that he could protect me from them. I told him everything that had happened, and he asked me if I would be willing to give evidence in a trial.
After I had worked and lived like this for over a year, the police and gangmasters licensing authority came to my house one day. They took me to a place where I could recover, be helped to find a good job, support myself. This is all I ever wanted.
4 men were arrested from the gang. And later I found out that there were dozens of workers at the factory who had been threatened by this gang. The police found new homes to those who had been badly hurt, and they also arranged protection for their families in Lithuania.
I'm all right now, working a new job here for a good agency. But I've been through a tough time. When I look back at everything that's happened, I realize how easy it is to get trapped in a really bad situation. I should never have paid for a job that I didn't know existed.
I should never have paid for a job. This is not legal in the UK.
I should never have given away my passport and identity card. By then, it was already too late.
I should never have got into debt with someone I didn't know or trust.
I was stuck in debt to him, and he controlled my bank account. I was afraid that he would attack me if I did anything wrong. I know there are still many more people who are trapped like I was.
So you can't really make assumptions about whether somebody is a victim or not just by their nationality. Actually, anybody can become a modern slave. So who are these people? Well, they're often the most vulnerable people, and they might have been trafficked here, but not necessarily. They could simply be in debt, or they might have just been intimidated by people that have come into their lives and are now controlling them through threats and violence maybe against themselves or against their loved ones, either here or abroad. And we're going to look at some of the red flags and warning signs later and about what we can do about this. Just bear in mind that as soon as you have somebody who is removed from their home environment, who maybe is not with friends and family, they can become vulnerable to this. It is one of the factors that can make you vulnerable to exploitation in this way. Other things, for example, if they don't have their own identity documents, if there's a reluctance to speak, if anything really that just strikes you as slightly unusual, note that. It could be a red flag, and we'll look at what to do when you think there might be a problem. We've got a legal duty to ensure that we don't have modern slaves in our supply chain. So what is our supply chain? Well, actually our supply chain runs very deep. It's wherever we do business, and who do they do business with? So really, what can we do? We can keep a lookout. We can observe. If we see anything that looks unusual, we'll look at who we can contact. Every year, we publish a modern slavery statement about all the steps that we take to ensure that modern slavery is not in our supply chain. So we have a brief case study here about Nick. He was experiencing hard times. He was trying to work. He got offered a job. Fantastic. Arrives here and he's kept a prisoner. Somebody grabs his documents. He's watched. He's not allowed out. Sometimes he's attacked. And he's moved, as you can see, from place to place. That's quite common experience. Sometimes people are kept in one place for a long time. Sometimes they're moved from place to place. They don't get their money. The traffickers open bank accounts in this individual's name, but the individual never sees the money that they've earned. Eventually, fortunately, this individual escapes. And we're going to look to see what we're going to do if we come across somebody that might be a Nick or one of the other victims that we've seen today. Here is a video prepared by the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority with Stronger Together.
Check this out. Give me a sec. Right, mate? Oi, Where's my chocolate bar?
You don't need any more chocolate, mate.
I have some concerns with the group of men over there.
What concerns?
I'm sure it's nothing, but they seem a bit uncomfortable. Have you met the man that drops them off?
Doesn't sound like anything to me. We can't keep wasting time looking over all these minor issues. We need to focus on ramping up production. This is a busy time for us.
Okay, fair point. Thanks.
Give me a sec.
I have some concerns with the group of men over there. Have you met the man that drops them off?
No. What's his name?
I'm not sure. I might be imagining it, but something doesn't feel right.
Leave it with me, I'll have a word with him.
Thanks.
So that's it, really? I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a problem.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
Забирай się w машину. Забирай się в машину.
Right, mate?
I have some concerns about the group of men over there. Have you met that man that drops them off?
I'm sure it's nothing.
I know, but still. Would you mind if I ran a HR check?
Sure.
Do they speak English?
I'm not sure. Did they all start together?
Yes, they all start at the same time. If you've got concerns, then I think it's worth a call to the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority.
Okay, you're sure you don't want us to do anything? Okay, we'll see you a bit later on today. Thank you.
How many people are we expecting when we get there?
Okay, so there's 3 victims. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Thanks for coming so quickly. We've had some concerns about 3 of our workers, that they might be being exploited.
You've done the right thing in contacting us. We now need to investigate this. If your suspicions are correct, we will remove the victims and ensure they're taken to a safe place. If there is evidence, the GLAA and partners will deal with those who have exploited these workers.
Really good job, Helen. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you.
So, what sectors are we looking at here? Well, it can be any sector, but some sectors known to be targeted, particularly by the criminal gangs. Anybody in food and agriculture, anything where you have a production line, where you have large numbers of people, perhaps throughput of people, particularly industries covered by the gangmasters licence, but also the construction industry and hospitality, other areas as well, such as domestic servitude and the commercial sex industry. But please bear in mind that really, modern slaves can be found anywhere. And as soon as you introduce concepts such as debt bondage, actually, the worker might be highly skilled. Anybody who's borrowed money and comes under influence of a gang that operates in this way can become a modern slave. So let's just have a look at those red flags. So what's your relationship like with your candidate? Are they okay? Can they speak to you freely? Do they have access to their identity documents? Has anybody else expressed a concern, a co-worker? Do they have co-workers that they speak to? You might be able to physically see that there is a problem there. Perhaps they have bruises or other marks that aren't accounted for. Perhaps they're reluctant to seek medical treatment when they should. Perhaps they're afraid or hesitant. Can they move freely or not? If ever you come across a situation where a worker is not able to contact you directly or where they're monitored, that's a red flag. That's when you need to raise it with compliance. And quite often, obviously, if somebody is being watched, asking them directly if they're a modern slave, or obviously, or if they have a problem, that's not going to work, is it? So please do raise those concerns, do raise them with compliance, and we'll be able to work out the best course of action to make sure that we can work together to identify a problem, if there is one, and actually get a proper solution here. Do bear in mind that some of these victims, the people that traffic them, they make sure that they take these pictures of them, posing, smiling, looking happy. Just because there's a happy picture, it doesn't mean to say that necessarily everything's okay. So if you do have a concern, any concern, just because somebody can send you a happy picture doesn't necessarily mean that all is well. And if you do have any questions, please do feel free to get in touch with compliance. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining the fight against modern slavery.